Hi, I'm Ronnie from Ronnie's Garage. We're holding our monthly tech meet, and today we're going to be bleeding Silver Cloud brakes. Here.
Are the rods supposed to be rubbing?
Well, they're not. There's a tiny gap in there. They're supposed to be crisscrossed, yes. They're made, there's offsets on here, and they're right next to each other. Now, a lot of these old Clouds, you get a lot of clanking noises in them. And it has to do with playing the linkages and rubber stops and all that. Usually nothing to worry about. Sometimes if the person wants to get rid of it, we can get rid of most of it, but it just takes a lot of time.
When that car was new, did it exhibit those clunking noises, or did that come with age?
I don't know. I've only been working on cars since 1979, so I did not work on any new ones. So I don't know. You have to talk to somebody older. So all right, we did this left one.
Really old.
I'm glad I wasn't around then. Well, I was around. I just was just a wee lad. Okay, where did our light? Oh, the light died, huh? Oh, well, what's that? So let's move to our next wheel. So this will be a pretty easy bleed, just so you know, because there was nothing wrong with the brakes other than, well, it does actually. It's got original style hoses on it, and usually. Whoa, you can tell, where's the brake? Oh, here it is. It's got this crosshair pattern on it. See, it's kind of like a herringbone look on this hose on the outside. This feeds the rear brakes. The modern replacement ones have straight ribs on them that run longitudinally. Is that it? Yeah. So we're gonna recommend that we replace the brake hoses because the brakes don't work right on this, but the servo is a problem. So here we go. Let's get on this brake bleeder.
And why did you do this wheel first?
Because it is, in the hydraulic system, the furthest away from, in the rear at least, because the pipe, there's a pipe going to the master cylinder. It's a steel pipe here. It comes to this rubber hose and it goes to a T. Now this is a long tube and this is a short tube. And industry standard is to usually start with the furthest away. So you can get most of the air out, and then you just have a small amount on this side if there's any air. That's at least what I think is the reasoning. Well, my reasoning is not always right, because when I actually read the lyrics of songs I've been singing for years, I find out they're not quite the same. So perception is part of it. Okay, now you can see as soon as I open that enough, it's starting to move fluid. And that's just gravity pushing it through the master cylinder. So now let's watch it when I pump it. And you saw, here's what I want to show you something. The reason I have the long tube that goes in here, because you saw that bubble wanting to go right back up, right? So what happened is, once I got the fluid down to where this end of the hose is covered, then it's just going to suck fluid up instead of air. So that's better to keep the air out of the system that way. So there we go. And then, oh, I didn't see any. There we go. All right, let's go up front. Let's see here. Let's get some light on there. In the right place. There we go. Now you see the bleeder. So what we just bled there was for the upper master cylinder, because that's part of that circuit, which is, on the car, it's the front reservoir. It should be the front reservoir. If the back reservoir goes down when you breathe the number one system, then somebody has crossed the hoses going to the master cylinder. Not a big deal, but that's just... So I remember I talked about a little ball bearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull this bleeder all the way out, because this one is easier to see.
You said cinch those up, not too tight.
No.
What you're pulling loose looks like they're awfully tight.
Well, it's rust. Now if you look at this bleeder, inside, what you got, the bleeder has a hole here with the nut so you can open and close it. On the side here, it's got a little hole drilled in it that goes to this passage, so that allows the fluid out. Most modern bleeders have a point to them. These old Silver Clouds, what they have is they have a ball bearing that sits inside there, and it just tightens the ball bearing against the seat in there. So if you got one that you're trying to bleed, especially a rusty old car, then you have to stick a screwdriver or a seal pick in there, if it has this flat end, and then pop that ball bearing loose. But make sure you catch it, because they like to roll where you can't see them every time. That's Murphy's Law. Or the center of the car, the same, you know. So if you're having a problem getting fluid out of one, make sure that the ball gets seated loose. Now, if you got a good hydraulic system like this, as you saw on the back ones, it'll push it out. But I just wanted everybody to see that little ball bearing. It's critical. And I have actually seen them where, I don't know how it's sealed, but I'm trying to get this thing back in. And you can see it in there if you want to take a look. I've seen them without the ball and still seal. I don't know how, but your telltale sign would be that the hex part of the nut or the bleeder is almost against the backing plate. Okay, so now we'll just crack it slightly, put our hose on. And this stuff gets pretty slimy, so it's a little hard to put on, so I'm sorry about my head, but I gotta see what I'm doing here. Okay. So, another little trick is come on now, get this screwed back in some. If the hose is down like this, then what happens is when it's sucking air, it goes right to the high spot and back into the wheel cylinder. If you put the hose so it comes up above the bleeder, then the air will go to the high spot on the hose. It's the opposite direction. So it's always a good practice to keep part of the bleeder hose above your bleeder on this type of system. Okay, here we go. So what we have, it's not really bleeding, is it? Either I tighten it too much, or even though it's got a little gravity feed, if you're not getting fluid out of one of the systems, you either got a smashed steel tube, there it goes. And you saw it had a few bubbles that came right that first, and that's because I had the bleeder out and all that, it was sucking air in. So there's some that was in the system there. So that looks pretty good.
Well, what happens if this is mineral spirits, if somebody would put actually brake fluid into the system? How would that affect the system, and how would you get rid of it?
Now,
Take it all out?
you mean the mineral oil?
Yeah.
Not the spirits.
Yeah.
If you cross-contaminate either fluid, in other words, if you put mineral oil in a normal brake fluid system or put brake fluid in a mineral oil system, it reacts with the rubbers. And it either makes them swell up and fall apart. That's usually what happens. It's just both of them. If you mix them up, then it'll contaminate the system. And that's not a good thing, because if you get the wrong fluid and it gets into the system, you got to replace every rubber piece. And this doesn't apply to Silver Cloud, but it applies to the first mineral oil cars especially, which was 79 and then 80 for the sedans. What happened is they had just reservoirs you could pull the caps off of and put the wrong fluid in very easily. Later down I forget what year, but they changed the caps. There was a retrofit for all the cars at that time, so you had to use a special tube to put the mineral oil in the mineral oil cars, and you couldn't accidentally put because it was a big deal. It was a big deal. At the time when it was happening, if you put the wrong fluid in, it's 15 grand to fix on your brand new $300,000 car. Not a good thing. Huh? And whose fault would it be? It's not a warranty item.